Hi, and thanks for joining us. It's Natalie and David from the ASPI team, and we'll be talking about our new report to be released today. It's called A Return on Investment, the Future of the AFP-Polri Relationship. So I'll get David to start talking a little bit about what that project is about.
Thanks, Natalie. It was an interesting genesis for this project. We started research back in October. Of course, in November, we had the spying scandal, if I can call it that. That sort of put a whole new spin on this project, and it allowed us to think more deeply about where the relationship had been in the past, what benefits we'd got from the relationship, and then start to think about the future of the relationship between the Australian Federal Police and the Indonesian National Police. To do the project, we conducted almost 60 interviews with both serving and retired officials and police officers. We interviewed a number of academics who've specialised in the area, and we came up with two reports. One looked at the history of the relationship, and the second, the main report that we're discussing here, looks at the future of the relationship. Both Natalie and I, of course, worked on this quite closely together. I'm wondering, Natalie, what do you think were the main things we've learnt about the history of the relationship?
Yeah, I think one of the things we learned was actually how many areas of cooperation there are between the AFP and Polri. I think a lot of the time when we think about the Indonesia police as Australians, we often think about it in relation to terrorism, but of course there are a whole bunch of other areas around transnational crime issues, but also drug smuggling, other sort of environmental issues, intelligence sharing, cyber issues now more increasingly. Yeah, certainly understanding the breadth of the relationship, how many people are involved actually, both on the Indonesian side and the Australian side, but actually also how many agencies actually support the police relationship as well. So David, looking at the report itself, what are the major areas of the report?
There are four main areas. One, we're talking about the history of the relationship. In that relationship, we really show how it's moved from being just about information sharing through to joint operations. It's quite remarkable in that sense. The second, we've looked at the benefits of the relationship. We've looked at the benefits that we've accrued in just police to police cooperation. We've looked at the benefits that each institution has accrued from their collaboration with each other. We've looked at broader benefits for other government departments in the broader bilateral relationship. We've noted how it's been particularly important in helping Australia and Indonesia to maintain contact during times of tension in the relationship.
Actually, do both sides agree on what those benefits are?
I think so. I think so. Why they would value them differently and weigh them differently, I think both sides really saw strong benefits accruing to each individually, and we saw that in our Indonesian interviews in particular, where Indonesian police spoke about the way AFP was able to transfer skills to them. It was important in developing new high-tech or advanced investigative capabilities in particular. So yeah, I think both sides appreciate what they've got from the relationship.
Okay, great. I'm just getting back to those other parts of the report now.
The last part of the report is about the strategy for the future.
Right.
So we've developed a strategy for how we recover from the short-term freeze that's occurred in relationships, particularly around the cyber and the people smuggling area. In there, we've seen that it's going to be important to just re-establish the relationship and perhaps to correct a small trust deficit that's emerged in the cyber area.
Sure. I mean, there's one of these phrases that's been bandied about a lot with regards to the Indonesia-Australia relationship, which is people-to-people links, and I think that we actually touch on that as well in the report. Could you just elaborate a little bit on what some of the recommendations we've put forward are?
Certainly in the short term, it's really important for it to do a couple of things. One is to keep liaison officers in place so that the relationships can restart quickly. Secondly, to celebrate some of the great achievements of the relationship, and in particular we note that in July will be the 10th anniversary of the Jakarta Centre for Law Enforcement Cooperation. That's a cooperative training centre that's been set up by Australia and Indonesia. Amazingly successful, really worth marking.
Yep.
And the third is to start building some links amongst more junior officers on both sides to make sure that they are invested in the relationship and they understand the benefits as well.
And so what should we do with those junior officers? What do you recommend?
Look, I think a really simple way of doing it is to have a number of workshops by selecting leaders and potential leaders from both AFP and Polri bring them together to talk about issues that they are mutually concerned about, how to build a relationship. Cyber, a good one. Also, whole of government policy working might be another extension of that.
Sure, excellent. And just as a little aside, I mean, we obviously travelled to Jakarta in January to conduct some of our Indonesia-related interviews, and it was quite a challenging time for us. I mean, would you like to talk a little bit about the time that we spent there?
Look, it was essentially we delayed the trip. We were going to go in December. We delayed it in hoping that the atmosphere would become a little more conducive. I think it did. I think we were able to get a really good access to a few serving Polri officers to talk about what they thought was important, also to visit the Jakarta Centre itself and have a look. But we also were able to speak to a number of retired officers, including former Polri commanders and former commanders of the counter-terrorism areas. And we were also able to talk to a number of people from other government departments, academics, and also for NGOs who are working in the area in Jakarta. All in all, getting that field work in Indonesia was really important to helping us understand, as well as we could, the Indonesian perspective on this.
Absolutely. I think even to get an idea of what conditions AFP officers are working in over there as well. I think one of the highlights of the trip actually was getting Governor Pastika to speak to us, and for those who are watching, actually Governor Pastika was part of the Indonesian police force, and he was running the investigations into the Bali bombings in 2002 and in 2005 as well, I think.
It was certainly in 2002. And then launched a very successful political career after that. Look, it was really good to gain an understanding of the history, and because history is ultimately about people, to understand how people responded to and how they valued the relationship.
Absolutely. I think Governor Pastika really hammered home how important his relationship was with figures like Mick Kilty, and as a result of his time having spent in Australia. So I think that at least gave us some confidence when we talk about bringing Indonesian officers over here, that it really can work.
We also had a look at the long term of the relationship, and we tried to develop a concept where we would suggest broadening the relationship to ensure that there's strong cooperation in Indonesia, but also more cooperation in Australia and in Southeast Asia. Natalie, what do you think are some of the main recommendations we've made there?
In terms of regional cooperation? Well, actually looking at extending the cooperation outside of Australia and Indonesia, I think one of the things we discussed was even looking at working in Myanmar, looking at where we can use our skills and knowledge and cooperate on transnational issues that actually affect the region. So that would be really good if we could actually bring that benefit to other partners and build relationships there. That
idea actually gave us the idea for the title of the paper, a return on investment. We see that Australia and Indonesia have collaborated to a point now where Indonesian capacity in a number of important investigative areas like DNA analysis, disaster victim identification is at a really high standard. It's good for if we could take their training and our training, their cultural awareness, our cultural awareness, and go and put it to good use in a place like Myanmar, who is in some ways going through a transition not unlike what Indonesia went through 15 or so years ago. By that way, we're hoping to see a return on the investment that we've put in.
Well, actually, in addition to the report, is there anything else people can read about the AFP-Polri relationship?
The background paper we've put together about the history of the relationship is something that is really well worth reading. Also, too, we'll put a blog piece up on The Strategist, and hopefully that will encourage you to comment on the paper and give us your thoughts, because we would really appreciate understanding what others think about the relationship between AFP and Polri.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, David. So there's the report, A Return on Investment, the Future of the AFP-Polri Relationship. There's also material on our blog, The Strategist, available at www.aspistrategist.org.au. The report itself is available for download for free from our website, www.aspi.org.au, or also available to be ordered in hard copy as well. Thanks very much for joining us.